Good morning. I, my name's Ann Edwards. I'm with the Rethink Vape team at EVMS, and today we're going to cover the topic of cannabis use in vaping devices. There are lots of words for cannabis. Um, some of them we try to avoid using because they have a lot of racial and ethnic overtones, such as marijuana. Does have a very long history of racial problems associated with that term. However, I can't give you a magic set of terms to use for teens. It's going to be very teen specific, maybe what high school they're in, what their cultural experience of cannabis is. So you might have to find a way to use the right terminology with teens because, like we said before, with nicotine vaping, if you just say tobacco use in the home, your average teen is not going to think vaping means the same thing. So finding the right word is really important. E-liquids can contain nicotine, of course, but what we're specifically talking about today are THC, CBD oils, and other flavors and solvents that get put into vape juice or vape cartridges. Both traditional cannabis, so what we think of as cannabis, is used, but also CBD, which has a lower THC content. The biggest problem is that the manufacturers, and remember, all of this is unregulated because the federal government does not regulate cannabis products because cannabis is illegal on a federal level. So there is no standard manufacturing process, and they can basically put anything they want into vape juice or vape cartridges. One of those things might be vitamin E acetate. They use this as a cutting agent, yes, to dilute how much cannabis they're putting in there because they want to make the most profit, the people who are selling it, but also because there is a perception that if the liquid is thick, it is more potent. It's actually the opposite. But your average consumer would think a thicker liquid meant that they were getting a higher percentage of cannabis. Prior to the pandemic, there was a different kind of epidemic, and you were seeing E-Valley, which is e-cigarette vaping and related lung injuries. It's a terrible acronym that the CDC came up with, but basically vaping related damage to the lungs. And unfortunately, it also resulted in deaths, many hospitalizations, people in ICU and on ventilators. What the CDC and the FDA concluded was that vitamin E acetate was actually the culprit for the lung damage. So you are more likely to see that in THC related vaping products than you would in nicotine only vaping products. But it does bring up the point that there are a lot of things that are in the liquids that can cause harm, great harm. And because it's an unregulated industry, there is no federal protection for the consumer. Cannabis at the moment is decriminalized in Virginia. And of course, decriminalized is a tricky word. It doesn't mean it's legal. It just means that they're probably not going to prosecute you. You have to be 21 or older. You can purchase for your own use 4 plants per household, not per adult in the household, but just per household. You may have in your possession at the time up to 1 ounce of cannabis, which means there's a lot more legal access for adults. The more adults are able to access something, the more teens are able to access it as well. CBD, while it is also a hemp-derived product, does not contain the amount of THC, which is tetrahexyl. I always mess that one up. THC is the psychoactive part of the cannabis plant. CBD can contain some THC, and most of them do, up to 0.3%. So it's not that CBD is totally free of THC because mostly it's not. One thing I really want to point out is that this is not the cannabis of the 20th century. It's not even the cannabis of the early 21st century. The cannabis that is on the market now has been highly bioengineered to be very, very potent in a very small amount. So to get the same THC using a 1970s, say, product, you'd have to have a whole lot more of it to equal the same amount of THC that a small amount in 2022 can give you. That's really important because just using cannabis now, you're thinking, oh, it didn't do me any harm when I was in high school or college or whatever, but it's not the same plant as when you were in high school or college. And it is much, much higher concentration of psychoactivity. There are other cannabinoids, what we traditionally think of as cannabis or marijuana or whatever word you want to use for that is a delta 9 molecule. Now, the ones that sit on either side, so go back to your organic chem classes, so the formulas that sit on either side of it, delta 8 and delta 10, are very similar to delta 9, traditional cannabis. But, for instance, delta 8 is legal in 38 states. And I don't mean decriminalized, I mean legal in 38 states. And it is also not part of the federal cannabis ban. So even though, say, Denver has legal cannabis, it is still not federally legal. Okay? Delta 8 is. All you have to do is drive around or walk around and see the smoke shops and the vape shops, and they'll very often have a bright neon sign in the window telling you you can buy Delta 8 there. Delta 8 in particular, we're seeing now greatly alters perceptions. It greatly alters mood. It can lead to the person being disoriented. It is in no way, shape, or form safe to drive if you use Delta 8 any more than it is safe to drive if you have been smoking traditional cannabis or vaping it or drinking alcohol to any excess. Our perceptions of speed and other things around us are greatly impacted. So very legal if you're 21 or older, but very unfortunate and not legal and harmful to teens if they're using it. And even though what I'm talking about today has been cannabis, I also want to include the and other things in this presentation. Dr. Bonnie Halpern-Felsher, who is out of Stanford and is a leading expert on teens and vaping, says anything you're vaping, anything you're buying without a prescription and then heating and inhaling it is bad for your lungs. We like to tell the kids that if you're breathing in anything other than the air around you, you are breathing in something that your lungs are not designed to handle. So things that they think are really harmless because they have that GRAS designation. In this case, GRAS means generally recognized as safe. So flavorings that you can eat and are safe to eat might not be safe to breathe in, and a vape device heats up to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So as we all know, go back to that organic chem class, when you heat something up, you're going to change its structure. And even things that might be relatively innocuous at room temperature are not at 400 degrees. So other things that the teens are vaping, they want that caffeine hit. So they're actually vaping tea and coffee and caffeine derivatives. Vitamins, maybe vitamin C, vitamin B12, they're looking for a hit of energy. Essential oils, which also gets a little tricky because they might have those in their house. Their mom might have a diffuser and put essential oils in it. I have a colleague who will explain in great detail how come those are also harmful for you. So If a teen sees mom using them in something that is putting vapor into the air, of course they don't think there's anything bad for them in it, not realizing that you don't just stand over that diffuser and breathe this in straight. It's also not superheated like it is in vaping, and anything oily that you're breathing in is going to do damage to your lung cells. Melatonin, of course, because we know teenagers don't get enough sleep, so they might be using melatonin, but not orally. They might be vaping it instead, looking for the same result. I know this has been really quick, and I know that it's just an overview. It's a fast moving target, vaping in general, but then you add the complication of cannabis. It's the growing access adults have to legally possess cannabis greatly increases the access that teens are going to have. If you have any questions, if the team brings up something and you're just not sure about it, you can always reach out to us. You can either email me directly or email the team directly. I might not know the answer, but I will find it for you or find the person who can help you with it. So don't feel like you have to go into this with just a 15-minute talk and you're good to go. We're always here if you have questions. So thanks for listening to me today, and I'll see you in the next video.